And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another incredible installment from very high above all the insipid and bombastic twits in the Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Halloween on a Friday. Now, I don't really know if that's worse than Friday the 13th, but it's certainly different to have Halloween fall on a Friday. And I know that here in Sheridan, the little ghouls and goblins are not at school today. But they are out and about, and if you're listening, I just want you to be careful because all day today, definitely in Sheridan, probably in other parts of the Cowboy State, there's trick-or-treating going on like all day long. We had to spend $40 in candy. I think it was $40, maybe it was more, just so the salon could have trick-or-treaters today. So anyway, the kids are going to be out all over the place today and tonight, and so just watch where you're going, watch what you're doing. And just be really careful. Well, welcome to the program, my friends. It is Halloween here on Cowboy State Politics. It's Open Line Friday. That's right, my friends. It's Open Line Friday on Cowboy State Politics. This is the day where we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. You see, normally during the week, if I even decide to take calls, you kind of have to talk about what's on my mind. I mean, after all, that's why you watch this program, is to hear what I think about what's going on. So anyway, today it's totally different, and it's Halloween, so if you want to call in and be part of the program, the phone number in the studio is 307-374-8989. 307-374-8989. And whatever you got on your mind, go ahead and give me a call and we'll talk about it. Also on today's program, I couldn't think of anything spookier than inviting columnist Rod Miller on the program. And so here at the top of the next hour at 9 o'clock, we'll have the interview I did yesterday with Rod Miller. And I have to tell you, it's fascinating. Though, I'll admit, I kind of feel a little bit like I talked over him. But we were talking about socialism and subsidies. Apparently, Rod is in favor of those. But interestingly enough, in the end of the interview, we ended up agreeing on a whole lot. But it is an interesting discussion. It is Wildfile columnist Rod Miller. And, pretty much any conversation with him is an interesting one. So we're going to do that at 9 o'clock. But it's Open Line Friday, it's Cowboy State Politics, and it's Halloween, so there's plenty to get to. Top story. Democrats are losing CNN as the party uses food stamps as shutdown leverage. Now, I brought you a little bit of this story yesterday, where Democrats were actually challenging, the CNN anchors were actually challenging Democrats and saying, well, no, that's not what you said last time. No, before you said we couldn't shut down the government for any reason whatsoever, and now you guys are doing it. And this includes Jake Tapper, if you could believe it. And I quote, CNN hosts have clashed with prominent Democrats this week as the party signals it's willing to let tens of millions of Americans' food stamps assistance expire in order to increase their political leverage 4 weeks into the government shutdown. With some 42 million Americans set to lose access to, and by the way, I saw a statistic last night, maybe it was on Hannity, or it could have been Laura Ingraham, but 10 years ago, I mean, government always grows, but 10 years ago, there were 7 million people on food stamps. Actually, maybe it was more than that because, it was when Obama was president. And what they did is they eliminated the work requirement. And so that number, 7 million, has ballooned to 41 million people that are on food stamps. Tapper pushed back at Representative Melanie Stansbury after she said that the Trump administration and congressional Republicans are the ones, quote, choosing to starve American children, with the host noting that Senate Democrats have blocked a House GOP resolution, which, by the way, would have restarted funding to all of these programs. But they've done it 12 times. 12, my friends. Quote, this is also a choice by Senate Democrats to not vote to open the government. Yes, it is, Tapper told Stansbury. In just a second, I'll let you watch it for yourself. But the lack of awareness of Democrats is truly incredible. For so long, they've thought that you're so stupid, you're just going to go along with whatever it is that they say. And, that's not happening anymore. Because even CNN is pushing back on the Democrats. It's because CNN realizes that this is a losing Democrat strategy. That the longer this shutdown goes on, the more the polls seem to favor Republicans. And they did from the outset. Yesterday, I showed you the CNN soundbite where their pollster was saying, no, this is actually benefiting the Republicans. In fact, their approval rating is up 12 points. So anyway, here is a little bit of a media montage how the Democrats are losing CNN. I think it's incredible only because it's so unexpected. But here you go.
Democratic senators from New Mexico, your home state, vote to open the government so that these SNAP funds are not at risk?
Let me be clear. The administration is choosing to starve American children with money that they already have appropriated.
I'm not applauding their
tactics. The White House.
Well,
this is a choice by the White House.
This is also, Congresswoman, this is also a choice by Senate Democrats to not vote to open the government. Yes, it is.
Why is it suddenly right to do it this way and to do it for this long when it didn't used to be the right way in Democrats' view?
Well, that's an easy answer. It's Donald Trump.
But again, as we're 28 plus days into the shutdown, what has that done right now to extend these Obamacare premiums?
Because the House has been out of session the entire time, because our president is out of the country, nothing.
So is this a trade-off you're willing to make and continue to make, letting some Americans go hungry until these Obamacare subsidies get extended?
Well, let's be clear. We're shut down right now because Republicans are refusing to even talk to Democrats.
If you are so concerned about SNAP funds running out, why not ask Democrats in the Senate to vote to open up the government, and then the SNAP funding would go?
Is there a point, sir, where Democrats will have to cry uncle if these food SNAP benefits run out? In the past, Democrats have argued policy change is not something you should shut down the government over. That should be a different place where it is negotiated. In what world would Democrats decide to come to the table?
Listen, Democrats have already decided to come to the table. That was on day one.
Okay, all right. That's enough of that. You get the point. But the Democrats are insistent on continuing their losing argument. They really are. I mean, yesterday I described it as them being in a hole with a shovel and wondering why the hole keeps getting deeper. Because they keep digging. And that's what the Democrats are doing. Because for so long, their strategy, and it has worked, by the way, but for a really long time, their strategy has been repeat the lie, repeat the lie, repeat the lie, and eventually the public will believe it. Well, they're not buying it this time. The Democrats have voted probably 12 or 13 times now to not open the government, to not pay troops. And that, honestly, that one was the shocker to me. I thought for sure that the Democrats would vote to pay the troops. I thought for sure that they would do that. because it's a win for them. They get to come out smelling like a rose saying, look, we're opposing the Republicans. We don't like what they're doing, but we love our troops, and so we will vote to pay our troops. I mean, that was a win for them, an easy one. And still, they refused to vote on it. And so, I mean, it really the only answer as to why they're doing this is many of them are feeling challenges from their left wing. I know, it's really hard to get further left wing than Chuck U. Schumer, but evidently it's possible. And so anyway, because of that, the Democrats are just refusing to vote on anything. And it's very telling. Now, the article finishes up here. Quote, we're 28 days plus into the shutdown. We're now probably 30 because I think this was printed 2 days ago. But what has been done now to extend those Obamacare premiums? Berman asked Coons, to which he had no answer whatsoever. Because the Democrats don't have an answer. They went into this blindly thinking that the Republicans would blink because that's what they've always done. I went into great detail yesterday on the program discussing how for a really long time we didn't really have two different parties in Washington, D.C., really. I mean, it was just all the establishment folks, and maybe they differed a little bit on some minor policy things, but for the most part, pretty much just the same party. Well, that's kind of changed a little bit. And, I'm not saying that you should bank on it. I'm not saying this is going to be the change forever. But for the time being, at the very least, Republicans are holding the line, and it seems to be resonating with voters. Now, how can that translate into electoral wins? Well, by itself, it can't, because we're still, almost exactly a year away from the midterm elections. And so while this will be useful for a midterm election argument against those Democrats who are now in power, say, look, you guys voted, whatever the number is going to end up being, 14, 15 times not to fund the government, and you left 42 million people out there without any sort of assistance to food. And, it'll be useful in terms of an argument in individual districts. But as far as like a main time media narrative, it's not going to be all that useful for the simple reason that it's so far in the future. I mean, it's working great for right now, and if Republicans can keep up the momentum, it'll work for them during the midterms, but it's all going to come down to individual races. I mean, I suppose the media could latch onto this and go after Democrats, and if it were a whole of media approach, then that might work. But right now, it doesn't look like it because we're just too far out ahead. But anyway, I mean, it's working gangbusters for the Republicans right now. Another story that is definitely in the news is the Arctic frost investigation with Jack Smith. And, I hear these cliches thrown around on TV all the time. Well, this is worse than Watergate. No kidding, because Watergate was just a break-in and a cover-up. That's all that it was. We're not talking about going after the most powerful man on earth with every lever in the federal government. That wasn't Watergate. But it might be 100 times worse than Watergate, which is the title of this piece. And I quote, Senator Chuck Grassley revealed Wednesday that former President Joe Biden's corrupt Department of Justice and Federal Bureau of Investigation compiled what is being described as an enemies list of Republicans to target, including through subpoenaing phone records of several high-ranking Republicans as their part in their Trump lawfare. Grassley revealed that more than 1,700 pages of documents provided by whistleblowers have been shining further light on Arctic frost. Arctic frost was an investigation led by the Biden administration to, as the Federalist Margot Cleveland explained, quote, target Republicans in key battleground states. Then FBI Director Christopher Wray sent a memorandum to then Attorney General Merrick Garland claiming that, quote, fraudulent certificates of electors' votes were submitted to the Archivist of the United States for Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, and Wisconsin. Wray also asserted that these votes were part of a grand conspiracy to obstruct the certification of the 2020 election. The only problem with that is there have been multiple times in this nation's history where there were competing groups of electors sent to Washington to certify an election. This isn't something that's unique to Donald Trump. It hasn't even happened just one other time. It's happened twice, to my knowledge. But instead, Christopher Wray called it this grand conspiracy to, overthrow the election, which it wasn't. Neither was January 6th, by the way. If January 6th was an attempt to overthrow the certification of the election, it was the most poorly planned, poorly funded, poorly executed, poorly armed insurrection in the history of the world. And demonstrable. If you were honest about that entire thing, you'd have to look at it and say, in no way was that really an attempt to take over the government. Now, was it a riot? Sure, absolutely, every bit of it. Was there property damage? Mm-hmm. Yep. Lots of windows on the Capitol were damaged. But were numerous police officers killed? No. No matter what Nancy Pelosi says, there was only one person killed during the January 6th riot, and that was Ashley Babbitt. She was unarmed, and she was shot by a Capitol police officer. Any suggestion by Christopher Wray or his FBI that there really was an attempt to overthrow the election is just rubbish. According to Grassley, Smith, that is Jack Smith, secretly obtained phone record data from at least 8 senators and 1 congressman. Now, if you remember the last interview I did with Harriet Hageman, Representative Hageman, she thought, and she didn't know this for certain, this was just her guessing, that they probably surveilled all members of Congress, and that the memo that came out about those 8 congresspeople, the 7 senators and the 1 congressman, was just the only ones that had come out. And her question was, who didn't they surveil? Of course, Wyoming Senator Cynthia Lummis was on the list of people that had their phone data obtained illegally by the FBI and Jack Wray. Quote, I've recently been informed, and this is Chuck Grassley, by Verizon, that at least 11 members with Verizon accounts were affected. That includes a hard line for Senator Ted Cruz's office and a staffer's cell phone for former Senator Laffer. Grassley continued, adding that Smith backed down from subpoena requests placed to AT&T for Cruz's cell phone records after the company challenged the legality of the subpoenas. Cruz said that AT&T's counsel advised the company not to comply with the subpoena because it violated the speech and debate clause of the Constitution. Cruz said that the subpoena was accompanied by an order from James Boasberg. Oh, where have we heard that name? It couldn't be the guy that earlier this year tried ruled against the Trump administration over and over and over. Boasberg was the guy that said you have to turn the plane around, that he didn't care where that plane carrying illegal aliens was at, that you have to turn it around. I didn't know federal judges could be flight controllers, but apparently he thinks he was. But and that was just one of them. There were several different orders that Boasberg issued in response to Donald Trump. Quote, Boasberg issued an order to AT&T and signed that order prohibiting AT&T from informing me of his subpoena. That's Chuck Grassley. And Judge Boasberg gave the basis for that order, and that I'm not going to quote from the order, but he signed. But the court finds reasonable grounds to believe that such disclosure will result in destruction of or tampering with evidence, intimidation of potential witnesses, and serious jeopardy to the investigation. Boasberg was absolutely in the tank with the Democrats the entire time. With Jack Smith, with all of them. I mean, it's very clear when you look at the orders that he issued in opposition to the Trump administration. Now, Ted Cruz said, quote, there is precisely no evidence to conclude that I am likely to destroy or tamper with evidence or to intimidate potential witnesses. Zero evidentiary basis for that. This order is an abuse of power. The order is part of a weaponized legal system. Well, absolutely it is. All right, so that's the Jack Smith Arctic Frost part. And it's when you compare it to what they did to Donald Trump and the surveillance of Carter Page, who, by the way, was an employee of the CIA, this is it's times 10 or times 11 or however many Congress people they obtained phone records from. But it is exponentially an exponentially larger invasion of privacy and an exponentially larger abuse of government power because there's no evidentiary basis to obtain the phone records. Now, whether you realize it or not, it actually takes quite a bit, or it ought to take quite a bit of evidence for authorities to be able to tap your cell phone. And we're just private citizens. Imagine what is required to tap the phone of an elected official. And what ought to be. Well, Christopher Wray, Jack Smith, and everybody involved in Arctic Frost pushed it through liberal judges like Boasberg to get all of these subpoenas approved so that they could obtain phone records. And, as I mentioned, it was only AT&T that bucked at it and said, no, we're not going to do that. So here's the part that validates the claim I just gave you. Biden's FBI and DOJ sought to spy on the entire GOP. Quote, the whistleblower documents also show that Biden's FBI subpoenaed bank records, donor lists, and emails of numerous major conservative organizations and leaders, including the Trump campaign, the RNC, Save America PAC, the American First Policy Institute, the Conservative Partnership Institute, and MyPillow. Of course, they have to go after Mike Lindell. According to Cruz, 25% of Republicans in the United States Senate were the target of this fishing expedition. Okay, so it wasn't 7 or 8 senators. It was actually 15. Well, let's see here, 100. Yeah, so it's 25 actually. So it's much larger than the original memo led us to believe. Quote, they did so in a complete contravention of the Constitution, the separation of powers, the speech and debate clause, free speech, and the basic rights of privacy. Ted Cruz continued. So yes, this Arctic Frost is about 100 times bigger than Watergate. And Watergate caused Richard Nixon to resign, even though he got reelected. I mean, he still resigned, claiming, I am not a crook. So that the media, now I started out the program giving a little bit of credit to CNN, them pushing back on liberal politicians. But let's not give them so much credit that we forget that they're completely ignoring this investigation. If you stack up how much coverage was given to Arctic Frost by liberal organizations versus how much was given for conservatives, it's going to be completely lopsided. But you shouldn't expect anything less from the Democrat Party. I mean, we're living in a time of absolute corruption, my friends, when the rule of law doesn't mean anything more than what your last name is. Now, you often hear me say that we have to become a nation of laws again instead of a nation of men. It was Lenin and the Soviet Union who coined the phrase, show me the man, I'll show you the crime. Not show me the crime, I'll find you the man. That's the way that it's supposed to work. That you're innocent until proven guilty. That in order to be proven guilty, you have to be tried and convicted by a jury of your peers. All of the things that are listed in the Constitution. But again, we just went through an administration that did exactly the opposite of all of that. And again, and here's one thing that has constantly irritated me. You often hear people say, well, I'm not doing anything wrong. What do I have to worry about? Go ahead and let them listen to my phone calls. I'm not doing anything wrong. Well, that's a violation of your constitutional rights. And if one right can be violated, then they all can. We have to stand up for privacy, not just for elected officials, but for our own. There's no reason why the government needs to be inside, on our side of our front door. The Constitution prevents the government from doing that. Why? Because privacy is in itself intrinsically valuable. That if the government can spy on a sitting member of Congress, then they can do anything that they want. Then we end up, and the terminal result of this is the police state that London has turned into, or that all of the UK has turned into, where there's a video camera on every light pole that monitors everything. And there are some cities in America that are very similar to that. Of course, I mean, not to that degree. But it's a question of if you want to be completely monitored 24/7, or if you want to live in a country where we still have freedom. Well, if you like the latter, then you have to stand up against abuses of power like the ones that we've been seeing. You don't really have any choice in the matter, my friends. Either you stand against all of it, or you don't, or you stand in favor of trampling all of it. That's your two choices. You can't be in the middle. The only thing that stays in the middle of the road for very long, my friends, is the yellow line and roadkill. And even eventually, roadkill gets pushed to the side. And so if you don't want to be in that camp, you need to pick a side. and stand up for the Constitution. Well, we're a little bit early, but let's go.
Laughed. I heard you
Let's
laugh.
go ahead and take
You
a
laughed,
break.
You laughed, and then you left, but now you know I'm utterly mad. And they're coming to take me away, ha-ha. They're coming to take me away, ho-ho, hee-hee, ha-ha. To the happy home with trees and flowers and chirping birds and basket weavers who sit and smile and twiddle their thumbs and toes, and they're coming to take me away, ha-ha.
Are you tired of all the meaningless political drivel floating around right now? Endless commentary that really doesn't have anything backing it up? Do you long for the days of true investigative journalism, coming from an authoritative source who really doesn't care how popular and apparently good-looking a politician is? Fortunately for you, that's what I do on Cowboy State Politics. New episodes are published every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and you can get them anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest way is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There, you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles I might bring up during the course of the program. Cowboy State Politics Live, the program you're listening to right now, is broadcast every Tuesday through Friday, beginning at 8 a.m. Pay attention to all of that other block-headed nonsense if you want. Just make sure that you don't miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live. It's Open Line Friday, and if you want to be part of the show, the phone number in the studio is 307-374-8989, 307-374-8989. Go ahead and give me a call, whatever's on your mind. We'll talk about it. I can't promise how long we'll talk about it because it depends on what your question is, but we will definitely discuss it. So once again, that phone number is 307-374-8989. 8989, and it's Happy Halloween on the program. And just to give you a heads up, here in about a half hour, make sure you stick with the program because I'll have the interview I did yesterday with none other than Spooky Rod Miller. So that's coming up at the top of the hour. All right, so the Washington Free Beacon, it had the pleasure of reporting that there is an employment bloodbath that is happening at CBS. From the Beacon, an article entitled Bloodbath, CBS parent company announces mass layoffs and slashes the race and culture unit. And I quote, CBS's parent company Paramount announced on Wednesday that around 2,000 layoffs, including nearly 100 in the newsroom, and it eliminated the outlet's race and culture unit in an effort to crack down on ideological bias. As part of the cuts, the network will cancel its streaming shows CBS Mornings Plus and the CBS Evening News Plus, shutter its South Africa bureau, and revamp its Saturday morning program. The Wall Street Journal reported that, citing a source familiar with the changes. The Guardian reporter Jeremy Barr also reported on the cuts, posting on X, quote, that CBS gutted its race and culture unit. CBS has tasked that unit with overseeing, quote, news stories about race, culture, and injustice, ensuring that they have proper context and tone, according to a 2020 profile of executive producer Alvin Patrick. Paramount CEO David Ellison, who has vowed to root out ideological bias at CBS and right-size the failing network, announced the moves in an internal memo, which is not internal anymore. In some areas, we are addressing redundancies that have emerged across the organization, Ellison wrote. In others, we are phasing out roles that are no longer aligned with our evolving priorities and the new structure designed to strengthen our focus on growth. Ultimately, these steps are necessary to position Paramount for long-term success. So, in other words, they've got a couple of different pieces of their company that are just flat out biased. Which, if you have listened to CBS Evening News or any other, or 60 Minutes, and they just got done with a lawsuit paying off Donald Trump an untold amount of millions for the edited interview with Kamala Harris. And so they've got major problems, as does the whole media, at large. And so it's interesting when you couple this with the story I led with this morning about CNN now questioning Democrats. By the way, don't expect that to continue. But anyway, when you couple that with CBS laying off a whole bunch of people and eliminating an entire division, it shows you that it is not that, and this is where I differ with the Free Beacon on this one. It's not that they've turned in an ideological corner. It's not that they've decided that they have to make a change because they've seen the light and they now support Donald Trump. None of that is true, my friends. Rather, what is happening is they're seeing their ratings continue to tumble, if it was at all possible for them to descend from the cellar in which that network was occupying. So their ratings were low anyway, and they're absolutely low in comparison to even like Newsmax or Real American News, and certainly when compared to Fox. And so really all of this was nothing more than a financial decision, that you've got they had a bloated company that and they were getting crappy ratings. I mean, that's the long and the short of it, my friends, that it really has nothing more to do with anything other than just money. Ellison's announcement has sent the CBS newsroom into a tailspin. I'm sure it has. According to The Guardian, one staffer described the layoffs as nerve-wracking and said, quote, "seems no one is safe," while another called the cuts a bloodbath. CBS staffers had a similar meltdown earlier this month when Paramount announced Free Beacon founder Barry Weiss as the network's editor-in-chief. A throwing up emoji is not enough of a reflection of the feelings in here, a staffer told The Guardian. A second staffer shared with The Independent that, quote, people are using words like depressing and doomsday, while another noted that the changes, quote, have everyone just kind of freaking out, like literally freaking out, like maybe they're realizing their job isn't at all required anymore. Now, they've long faced accusations of left-wing bias in their coverage. In July, CBS and Paramount agreed to pay, here it is, $16 million to settle President Donald Trump's lawsuit, alleging that 60 Minutes, the network's flagship news program, deceptively edited the video footage last year to make then-presidential candidate Kamala Harris appear more coherent and boost her campaign. Now, think about it. The CBS Evening News was one of the premier news magazines in the media. I mean, I'm talking like 20, maybe 30, even 30 years ago. CBS, NBC, all of them had their flagship nightly news program. And that was the one that was, you had your anchor with the most gravitas, and they're the guys that handled the serious news. They're the equivalent to Brett Baier on Fox. All of the other hosts on Fox, well, I mean, they might do half news, half opinion. But when it comes to Brett Baier, that's the one program that Fox focuses on for news. Well, the CBS Evening News and NBC Nightly News and programs like that, those were the Brett Baier equivalents at those networks. And so when their flagship program, which they had two of them, CBS Evening News and 60 Minutes. When one of those two programs deceptively edits a video in favor of a political candidate, the entire network is down the tubes, and it cost them $16 million. So I mean, if you're the one that is running, running CNN, and you're the new guy in charge, of course you're going to get rid of those people. CBS has recently also come under fire for its anti-Israel bias, in particular for a January 60 Minutes segment that criticized Israel's war against Hamas terrorists and relied on sources affiliated with the Council on American Islamic Relations, CAIR. By the way, if you look up CAIR on Influence Watch or any of the watchdog websites, you'll find that they are almost a terrorist organization. They're radically left-wing, and they're not unbiased in any way, shape, or form. Ellison, in a July meeting with the FCC chairman Brendan Carr, emphasized, quote, his commitment to unbiased journalism. Yeah, right. If you believe that, I've got some really nice beachfront property somewhere around Guernsey to sell you. and pledged to reflect, quote, the varied ideological perspectives of American viewers at the network. In September, Paramount hired Kenneth Weinstein, a former president of the conservative Hudson Institute, to serve as CBS's ombudsman, investigating any complaints about bias from employees to viewers. So, at least on the outside, CBS is attempting to make it look like they're actually addressing their implicit bias. And I think that that's a good thing. But whether you should trust it or not, that's another matter entirely. Any changes that you're seeing in the media, even in all those sound bites at CNN, it all is boiling down to ratings. Now, if you think that David Muir or Mika Brzezinski, well, they're on PBS, NBC, or any of those hosts, Jake Tapper, any of those people at the major networks have had any sort of ideological shift, you're gravely mistaken. It all has to do with ratings. And that's just the long and the short of it. So, another big story that's coming out, and maybe we should start with old Karine Jean-Pierre. Let's go with this one here. So there's a lot coming out about how Joe Biden's presidency, how what was actually going on behind closed doors in Joe Biden's presidency is coming out now. There's a lot of former staffers that are actually telling the truth. There was a congressional hearing, which I told you about yesterday on the program, that some people are actually saying what's true, or they're taking the fifth, like Joe Biden's doctor. But there are even more obvious signs that things were not right in the House of Biden. Quote, here's a piece entitled, and I think this one is from the Federalist, but it says, here are 8 creepy ways Biden's handlers tried to hide his mental decline to keep his grip on power. And I quote, while President Joe Biden turned feeble before the nation's eyes, and I don't think that anybody can argue that one, when he was running for office, you could see it in his face. He was actually there. Now, he was still bumbling around and, created a gaffe reel that could have been 20 minutes long. But he was still there. He was still coherent. He was not the bumbling old man that we saw in the last 3 or 4 years, or 2 or 3 years of his presidency. But his chief of staff, his doctor, and even his wife refused to stop him from making a fool of himself on the world stage. They treated him like a puppet, abused the highest office in the land, and with the help of the propaganda press, lied to the American people all the while. A report released this week by the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform tells us what we already knew, but with greater detail. The 100-page report, The Biden Autopen Presidency, Decline, Delusion, and Deception in the White House, shows how members of the Biden's trusted inner circle were willing to do just about anything to keep him in office. Because with him in office, by extension, they were in office. And I can't remember if it was like Tuesday or Wednesday, but I brought you the story of how that really nobody ever talked to Biden about using the auto pen, that there were so many barriers in place, so many hoops to jump through, that really Biden never knew what they were signing in his stead and what they weren't. He was not in control of the White House. And let's be honest, for pretty much the entirety of his presidency, they called a lid at 11 a.m. in the morning, sometimes at 9. Nope, the president's done for the day. He's off to his nappy time. There will be no more press events. What president can you think of, except for him, that has done that has been so feeble and so old and, so tired that they had to go to bed or not do anything from 9 a.m. to 11. Well, there's 2 reasons behind them doing that. The first one is that he actually couldn't do it, that he really was in bed or in the residence, eating his pudding or whatever. But the second is without the scrutiny of the press, without the prying eyes of the media and politicians, everybody except Joe Biden was able to operate with near impunity, which they could pretty much do anything they want. That's why you ended up with just about every document in the Biden White House being signed with the auto pen, because Biden didn't have any idea it was going on. And so if you call a lid at 9 a.m., well, you're free the rest of the day to do whatever you think needs to be done. The committee, chaired by James Comer, has asked the Department of Justice to investigate the actions of members of the inner circle and its findings related to executive actions signed by the Autopen. Quote, President Biden's inner circle worked tirelessly and creatively to conceal the president's bad days. Whether it was through Hollywood filmmakers or aides disguised as the Easter Bunny, the report said. There was, and here's the first big one, there was no mental exam. Earlier this week, his doctor, the guy that was in charge of the president's health, testified that he was just, full of energy, just an older man that was full of energy and in complete possession of his faculties. And then he took the Fifth Amendment to pretty much every question. Biden's longtime physician, Kevin O'Connor, never conducted a cognitive exam on Biden. Instead, O'Connor, quote, propped up the president through grossly misleading medical assessments. His refusal to answer questions about the execution of his duties as physician to the president, combined with testimony indicating that Dr. Kevin O'Connor may have succumbed to political pressure from his inner circle, influencing his medical decisions and aiding in the cover-up. Now, the propaganda press failed to use basic observation as a journalistic tool and pushed O'Connor's unchallenged reports out into the public. Now, imagine if this were Donald Trump. And just remember the first Trump presidency, how much attention was held over him and his doctor. I mean, they pushed the president so far that he took a medical exam, which ended up blowing up in the Democrats' face, like all of this usually does. But imagine if it were a conservative in office the last 4 years. What would the press have done to him? There would be no end to the investigations. There would be no end to the articles of how feeble he was. And it would be virtually impossible to claim otherwise. It's been a while since I've done this for you. But this is far worse than what Edith Wilson did to Woodrow Wilson. Now, if you remember, Woodrow Wilson had a stroke, and he was pretty much bedridden. And so for, I believe it was like the last year or 2 years he was in office, it was really Edith Wilson that was running the presidency. In her memoir, she wrote that she only took the most important documents to her husband to sign. And literally what she would do is she would, hold the pen in her hand and place his hand over hers and sign the document as if that made any difference. But this is so much worse because you have an unelected, and of course Edith Wilson was unelected too, but you have an unelected group of radicals that were pretty much doing anything they wanted in the White House while the president suffered. Now, here's another one, the debate. Who could forget the disastrous debate, and who in their right mind let that old man go up against President Trump? Well, it was a calculated move to get him out of the way so that they could put somebody else in power. That's why they chose Kamala Harris. And the reason why they chose her is she was pretty much the only one that they could choose. And so that whole thing was calculated. I doubt that there was anybody in the White House that actually believed that Joe Biden could perform well in that debate. Now, the whole purpose, well, not the whole purpose, a goal of moving the debate forward was to show that that was not the case, that he was in possession of his faculties, or at least that was the outward, the outward told lie. Let's see here. Where did it go? Yeah, and unfortunately, he had a bad night, and it was just the opposite. So I thought that at that point, and this is Chief of Staff Zients saying this, given the polling, concern around the president and his age, these calls from leadership on the Hill, the caucus, and his likelihood of being reelected had diminished quite a bit, and that he was better off letting someone else do that, Zients said. Now, NPR reported that the debate, quote, breaks with campaign tradition occurring months earlier than usual. And now we know why. Because they were scared that he was going to get far worse than he actually was. Keeping Biden in office and the 2024 campaign was profitable for Mike Donilon. One of Biden's longtime advisors, Donilon, was also Biden's 2024 campaign chief and told the committee that he received, quote, just a little bit short of $4 million in that position. He was paid monthly, so every month Biden stayed on the campaign trail was another paycheck for Donilon. He told the committee that Biden would have paid an additional $4 million if Biden had won the 2024 election for a total of $8 million. So Not only was Biden being used for political gain, he was also being used as a piggy bank. And then there were a whole bunch of Hollywood handlers. Who could forget George Clooney's letter to the editor of, I believe it was in the New York Times. For help with Biden's bumbling stage presence, the White House enlisted the help of Steven Spielberg and Jeffrey Katzenberg, co-founders of DreamWorks and former chairman of Walt Disney Studios. They tried to improve his speech delivery, but said that his voice was not loud enough. So in other words, you got a couple of Hollywood producers, and you hired them to improve how the president sounded, but they were unable to do so. They may have considered a wheelchair at one time. Let's see here. Reports list that many times Biden fell, tripped, or stumbled in public. On March 19th of 2021, Biden tripped or fell 3 times in the span of 3 seconds while boarding Air Force One. ABC News minimized the incident with the incredible headline, quote, Biden just fine after tripping 3 times jogging up the steps to Air Force One. Now, I've got a little bit of a montage of Biden screwing stuff up and stumbling, but go ahead and take a look at it. And you tell me if he just, if he just tripped going up there. But here's that montage.
I think folks need to understand that the president passes, again, a cognitive test every day. If you look at what a clinical cognitive test is actually, what it actually does, it is a 15-minute appointment that is administered by someone that most of the time people don't actually know.
Here he is, tripping going up the stairs. Once, twice, 3 times, and he's down. All the way up, and then he's going to stand up and just wave. I pay no attention to any of that. Here he is wandering around. And then they have to go grab him to take a photo. That was at the G7 summit. I mean, absolutely incredible, my friends. But all of this, and you could see, he puts on the shades. I love that part. But everybody can see. It was clear as day to the rest of the world what the administration was doing, that they were absolutely covering up everything to do with the president. And the reason for, and nobody with half a brain would think that they were going to get away with this for forever, that it was going to continue in perpetuity. They knew eventually the bill would come due, that either he would lose the election or he would, they would continue on, and it would become obvious that the president was not the one running the country. And, I think both of those things actually happened, that he was not going to be able to, to run the country at all. And that, he wasn't going to win the election either. So, all of these things are coming out now. Of course, one of the reasons for it is that, now his handlers think that they're safe, that there's no reason why they can't come out and talk about it, which is exactly what Karine Jean-Pierre is doing. And the other part that the media is playing is they're playing misdirection on, and it's not like there aren't a whole bunch of other stories happening today. I mean, the stack of stuff is full of a whole bunch of different things that were going on, and they're going on right now. And so a little bit of help from just the media, a little bit of help from everything that's happening in the world. And, you have a recipe for being able to hide what's happening to the leader of the free world. And I don't think there's any other question of that. So let's go ahead and take another break. And when we come back, we're going to go ahead and talk to Rod Miller. It's an interesting interview. Of course, they always are with Rod, but we'll do that in just a second.
Working in the lab late one night, when my eyes beheld an eerie sight, for my monster from his slab began to rise, and suddenly, to my surprise,
he did the mash.
He did the monster mash.
The monster mash.
It was a graveyard smash.
He did the mash.
It caught on in a flash.
He did the mash.
He did the monster mash. From my laboratory in the castle east to the master bedroom where the vampires feast, the ghouls all came from their humble abodes to get a jolt from my electrode.
They did the mash.
They did the monster mash.
The monster mash.
It was a graveyard smash. It caught on in a flash.
Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics. Hunting season. Right about now, you're off with all of your pals, stalking the big gigantic elk or buck mule deer that you've been thinking about all summer long. And your lovely wife is at home, probably enjoying her time without you. But soon, my friend, all of that is going to come to a screeching halt. And I want you to think about just one little thing. She's able to park her car inside the garage because all of your hunting crap is with you right now. Now, if you'd like the marital bliss to continue, I suggest you make a call to Marcos and Jesse at Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. They can build you a garage or a barn or any other type of metal structure for you to store all of your toys in so that your wife can continue parking inside the garage. And you can avoid sleeping on the couch for the next month or two. Call Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. Get them to build you a metal building before it's too late. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live. I'm David Iverson, doing what I was born to do with talent given to me by God himself. Welcome back to the program, my friends. It's Open Line Friday, and it's also Halloween if you want to be part of the show. The phone number is 307-374-8989. 307-374-8989. Now, of course, there's a lot of different stuff going on with the program. And, you know, one thing that I'm going to start very, very soon is an email newsletter. I don't know exactly what I'm going to call it. I have no idea quite yet. But, you know, I am going to be starting one. And the only way that I can do that is if I have your email address. So go to my website, cowboystatepolitics.com. And the very first thing you'll see is a pop-up window that says join our mailing list. You put your email address in there and it'll shoot me an email and I can put you on the list. It's going to be fascinating. I think that I'll probably do a weekly newsletter because I get irritated with my email box filling up with 10 and 20 emails all from the same source. It really irritates me, and I won't do that to you. I'm thinking just one newsletter every week. And so make sure that you go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, put your email address in there and hit the old submit button, and I'll get you on the list. So do that. Also, there's going to be a lot of changes coming to the program. I've been telling you that probably in 2 weeks, I'm going to release the Open Range Record app. That's going to be fantastic. A whole new news source for you. Of course, you can get all of the Cowboy State Politics content on there, as well as news articles. And the whole idea is news on the news page, opinion on the opinion page, and try to keep the two from meeting. That's one thing that the media does that irritates the living crap out of me, that we really don't have news anymore. And I don't know if we ever did, but because it's impossible to eliminate bias out of everything. But we're going to do our best to get that done. And I'm releasing it when I am, because it's going to be right before the legislative session. And so you'll have a source to go there and find out, here's what happened with the bill. Here's what the vote was. Here's who voted for it. Here's who voted against it. Here's what this person says. And here's what another person says. Boom, done, hit send, gone. It's so anyway, that's going to be released in a couple of weeks. I'm pretty excited about it. Also on the podcast today is our traditional Halloween story. And I really haven't decided which one I'm going to read to you yet. I always do this on Halloween. And I think last year was the Cask of Amontillado. Around Halloween, I become more of a fan of Edgar Allan Poe. But every Halloween since I started Cowboy State Politics, there's been a Halloween story. So don't miss that. That'll probably be released. I'm saying, noonish is probably a good time, but you'll be able to listen to it on Halloween, some classic spooky tales. And so that's just one of the fun things I get to do on the program. And, we're getting towards the holidays, so these things are going to happen more frequently. Of course, Thanksgiving, and then I do the same thing on Christmas. There's a Christmas story that I put together that really, you're not going to believe this, but I actually end up looking all year long for the right story for Christmas. So anyway, my friends, that's just a couple of things that are happening on the show. And, I'm pretty excited about it. This thing's growing, and it's a heck of a lot of fun. So yesterday, I sat down with our pal Rod Miller, and what precipitated this was a back and forth that he and I had on social media. Of course, one of the earlier episodes of this week, or maybe it was last Saturday, can't remember, but it was entitled Gunner. He's a winner, all right, because he put out a column claiming that the government should pick winners and losers because, Gunner Mom wants to be a winner. And I disagreed, as you can imagine. And Rod, he and I went back and forth a little bit talking about government subsidies. So we thought we should come on the program and have a little debate about government subsidies. I don't know if we solved anything, but here is that discussion, my friends, me and Rod Miller yesterday afternoon. Once again, joining me on the program is our pal, Rod Miller. Rod, how the heck are you?
I'm doing good. Any day you wake up and there's no chalk outline around your body or police tape across your door, it's a good day, David.
You often have problems with police tape, do you?
No, not me.
Well, you do live around Cheyenne, so you never know.
I know. Yep.
So the reason I wanted to have you on, Rod, is you and I had a back and forth on social media about your tendency to like picking winners and losers. So, and my position, of course, is that the government should not be picking winners and losers at all because it ends up being socialism. But why don't we start there, Rod? I know that there was a recent column by Gunner Mom that I took particular exception to. Why don't you just go ahead and tell me your opening thoughts, and we'll just go from there.
On Gunner's letter?
Yeah, let's talk about him.
All right. If you're talking subsidies, there's a great amount of hypocrisy out there when people talk subsidies. I think Gunner's column was probably precipitated by, Radiant Energy choosing to move to, where'd they go? Tennessee instead of building like a reactor manufacturing thing here in Wyoming. And everybody said, yes, that's not the government's role to, grease the skids for an industry like that. Keep government out of business. And then a couple of days later, it was announced that the Wyoming Energy Authority is going to give $4 million to, I think, Basin Electric to do a feasibility study on their new, another unit at the Dry Fork plant. Everybody at that point was, coal, USA. So if you step back and look at that, how Wyoming views government subsidies, they like it when the government is subsidizing something that they like. They hate it when the government is subsidizing something they don't like. So that makes the discussion different.
I think you're right about that, and I would agree with you that there's a tremendous amount of hypocrisy when it comes to taking taxpayer money and giving it to companies for whatever it is that they're doing, be it nuclear or coal or anything else. I mean, frankly, when you're talking about a big company that like the Radiant Nuclear, you brought that up. They're discussing dumping millions and millions of dollars into a single project. And yet there was an outfit in Casper that, I don't know, I can't remember the name of it, but some like business development outfit, and they were going to dump, several $1 million into that. Well, first, I think I would argue that we ought not be subsidizing private business at all. I mean, that's just frankly not the role of business. But you're right.
So you oppose the government of Wyoming subsidizing Basin Electric?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
okay, all right, good.
If you're a big power company like MDU or Basin Electric or any of those really, or if you're a coal company, there's no reason why you need to have, a taxpayer advantage over some other outfit. I think that just creates a whole bunch of different problems. And, and let's just be honest, if the government is backing you, well, that's, you've got like an unlimited money supply, basically. I mean, whereas private business, they don't have an unlimited checking account.
True. So you oppose subsidies of any kind?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is not the job of government. And, we can debate.
That's fair.
I think that the debate gets a little bit more muddy when we talk about, infrastructure projects or things like that. But I don't think the government has any business playing around in the free market. I mean, their only job is to create...
You mean picking winners and losers in the free market?
Yeah, they shouldn't be doing that at all. Because, and I'll give you a classic... go ahead, Rod.
David, every time the United States wants a new missile system, it's put out to competitive bid. Lockheed, General Dynamics, whoever, they bid on building this new jet or whatever. It's a competitive process. And the government chooses which company gets the contract. That is a government's big thumb on the scale of private enterprise. Now, do you have an alternate method for the United States acquiring the defense system other than competitive bid?
Okay, so I think that we're talking apples and oranges here, because when you're talking about a competitive bid process, there are, and whether it's the defense industry or if it's Buffalo, Wyoming, or Cheyenne, and they want to build something, somebody has to do the work. And if the competitive bid process is fair, and by fair I mean, hey, we got this project, tell us what your price is, and then in the end, the whatever authority it is that put the project out picks the best suited company, the lowest price, and different bids have different qualifications to them. But if the competitive bid process is fair to every company, I think that's a very different thing than handing out a bucket load of cash to a data center just so they'll come to Cheyenne.
You would lump that in with infrastructure subsidies. That's the role of government.
Well, okay, so I think that when you're talking about infrastructure, I think that fits within the wheelhouse of the role of government. I mean, we all like driving on smooth roads, unless you're in Sheridan and your county commissioners are spending money on flower pots instead of the roads. But
yeah, but David, doesn't that have the aroma of socialism to it?
No, I don't think so. And here's why. Because the role of government is actually pretty small, right? You provide water, sewer, police, infrastructure, and you got to have some administration in there to run your town or whatever. But that's the role of government. Those are things that government has to do. When you step outside of that, out of providing those those few essential things, that's when we start dipping into socialism. When you're giving millions of dollars to subsidize windmills, which we've done, or we're giving the governor's writing checks to do his, direct air capture, or whatever it is. I mean, that's totally outside of the role of government.
Okay, David, watch my footwork here.
I'm sure you're dancing a jig.
Subsidies are not only direct disbursements of money. Would you agree? Businesses can be subsidized through regulation, through law.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if I would go that far, because when I think of subsidies, I'm thinking of, like either a tax benefit, or you're literally giving money to one organization or another. But I think that most of it revolves around like something monetary. I don't know that I would say a particular law would be subsidizing it.
Okay, let's think back to 1970 and the passage of the Clean Air Act and the regulations pertinent to the Clean Air Act.
Okay.
Government made a decision that Western low sulfur, low BTU coal would have a competitive advantage that you could count in terms of money over Eastern high BTU, high sulfur coal. And they created a business atmosphere where if you're going to burn high sulfur Appalachian coal, you had to install these huge, big, expensive scrubbers. And if you're going to burn Wyoming coal, you didn't have to put scrubbers in.
Well, because it didn't produce all of those nasty side effects.
Pardon me?
Well, I mean, the reason for it is the low sulfur, low BTU coal didn't produce all the nasty side effects, would be my guess anyway.
Right, yeah. That was government putting its thumb on the scales of industry for a public purpose. Is that wrong?
Well, okay, so let's talk about that, because I believe when you and I were going back and forth, I said, look, the only thing the government needs to be doing is creating a fair tax environment that is fair to everybody. You know, that businesses pay the same rate as everybody else, and that you have to have some regulation. So your regulatory framework needs to be as least restrictive as possible. That, you know, you got to have some regulations. But we don't want to have them burdensome.
Yeah, no argument from me.
You know, and I don't think, I mean, if we're being honest, Rod, nobody really wants to have, you know, a big smokestack bilging out, you know, all sorts of really nasty smog. But I think we're at a point now where, you know, you drive by Dave Johnston power plant, and okay, yeah, there's a bunch of steam coming out of the stacks, but that's what it is. I mean, I think the time of power plants, you know, bilging out huge amounts of smog is, I think that's history.
But you cannot deny, David, that the passage of the Clean Air Act and those regs favored economically Wyoming over Kentucky.
I would think, yeah. I mean, I would tend to agree to a point. Like, you and I both know that in most applications, or in a lot of applications, I don't know about most, but in a lot of them, high BTU coal is blended with Wyoming coal. I mean, one of them burns too hot, one of them burns too low. And so in a lot of ways, those two industries work together.
Yeah, correct. Understood. But there would be no Powder River coal province had it not been for the Clean Air Act.
I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, I would agree that, yeah, okay, it helped out Powder River coal. But I think when you look at the long term of it, there is no denying that the Powder River Basin would have existed.
Prior to the Clean Air Act, there was no coal mining in the Powder River Basin.
Okay.
All the coal mining was along the UP main line, and it was used for locomotives.
Okay. All right. Well, let's talk about some modern subsidies then, shall we? I mean, how do you feel? Okay. How do you feel about giving taxpayer dollars so people can put up windmills?
I don't have a problem with it.
Okay. Well, here's the problem with it. First,
well, I have the same bellyache that I have with that I have with Wyoming giving $4 million to Basin Electric.
Yeah, I mean, both of those are wrong.
Yeah, they're both wrong.
Yeah, and I mean, and there's so many examples. Like, Rod, have you been following the a lot of the stuff that my friend Rebecca has been digging up about all this affordable housing? Have you followed any of that?
No, not really.
Okay, well, I mean, essentially, the nuts and bolts of it are that we gave a lot of taxpayer dollars to private developers to build affordable housing, so-called affordable housing. And, you know, this one Montana company, they've got, you know, buildings all across the state. But the problem is, one of the big incentives that was given to this one company is they don't have to pay a lot of property taxes. Well, when we give out taxpayer dollars, it disincentivizes private development. And, if we can, I'm sure we could debate Powder River Basin coal all day long, but I think like where we're at right now, when government literally gives out money either in the form of a tax break or in direct cash disbursements, it absolutely disadvantages private enterprise.
Yeah, and I'm at a disadvantage talking about this affordable housing issue because I don't know much about it. Was there a private contractor who was willing to build that housing?
I don't even know that they went that far, to be honest with you, Rod. The one that I'm most familiar with happened in Jackson. But I think, and it's one company. They're called Blue Line Development out of Montana. But what I was getting at is that, counties across the state are very excited about building so-called affordable housing. Well, okay, again, that's not the job of government. And second, if you want to know why, one of the reasons why housing is so expensive is because the government gets involved.
Utah Senator Mike Lee might disagree with you. One of the reasons he wanted to sell 300,000 acres in Wyoming was to build affordable housing.
Yeah, that was one of the things that he mentioned. Yeah, and I would disagree with Senator Mike Lee. I don't think that's the government's place.
Yeah, well, that makes two of us.
And that's an interesting subject you bring up there, Rod, because and I think you and I would agree that part of the checkerboard problem that we have in Wyoming is that you've got, private parcels that are out in the middle of state or federal land, and then vice versa. And really, the only way to solve that checkerboard problem or the corner crossing thing or any of that is to simplify it. And I've got no problem with if there's a chunk of federal property that's by, I don't know, Sheridan, I've got no problem with that. Now, if it were, 1,000 acres out in the middle of the Bighorn National Forest, then I would probably have an issue with that.
Yeah, I agree with you, David. The notion of consolidating ownership, blocking up private versus federal land, is a good one. It kind of falls apart in practically doing it.
I think it's a giant problem.
And it's been tried and successfully done several times. It's just, you get into real estate law and it starts mucking it up big time. And the checkerboard is the absolute worst form of land tenure anybody could come up with.
Oh, and
that's a product of the UP main line.
Well, one of the main causes of it. And it's, it's one of those problems that I don't think that any one of us is going to solve. And, certainly you're not going to solve it without doing some sort of land swap, either between the feds and the state or whatever.
Legally, the federal government could provide access to every federal acre in the West across private land if they condemned rights of way.
Yeah, but that's not right.
Eminent domain.
I mean, they could.
Constitution. It's in the Constitution, David.
Not really. In the Constitution, Rod, there is a very, very short list of things that the federal government can own. And, 46% of Wyoming is not on the list.
Well, good luck overturning that. That's Sagebrush Rebellion version 3.0, and that dog never did hunt, David. Seriously.
No, it never did. But if we want to talk about constitutionality, I mean, that's right there.
Well, yeah, but under the Fourth and Fifth Amendment, the government can take private property, provided that it's at fair market value and done with just compensation. They can't steal it.
But I think, honestly, Rod, don't you think that, anytime anybody starts talking about eminent domain or anything like that, I start getting a lot of heartburn. And it's, private property rights absolutely have to be protected. And, unless you can demonstrate that it's a necessary public need, which even then, I mean, it's got to be pretty clear.
That's the whole premise. The government can't just condemn private property without there being a demonstrated public purpose.
No, there is
So
an
you have
issue.
to-
There is an issue going on right now up here in Sheridan where I believe it was MDU, and they want to put in this big transmission line and, across, private property. And, the transmission line didn't exist before all these folks bought their land. But it's we're talking about like right up close to the base of the mountain. So all these people bought property for the view shed, and at the time they bought it, there wasn't this big, huge transmission line. Well, now there is, and you have a private company that's saying, "Oh no, this is for the public purpose. We have to do this." And I don't know as much about it as I should, but from what I gather,
Congress has given private utility companies the ability to condemn land for infrastructure.
Yeah, well, I think that we need to do some work on that because, man, I think you got to negotiate with each private landowner and negotiate in a fair way too.
Yeah, well, yeah. You can't condemn property without doing that first.
And I think the best example of that, and I don't know, I spent a lot of several years working for an oil and gas company doing permitting. And, each oil and gas company, they would have to go to each landowner and say, look, we're going to drill the well out on your property no matter what you say. But, we have to be able to get there. And so they would negotiate, an agreement to cross that landowner's property. And, some of those agreements were crazy. And some of them might be, hey, we'll pay for two new gates and we'll put scoria down on the road. Or others had reservoirs built on their property, but it was negotiated between the oil and gas company and that private landowner. And
because the mineral estate dominates.
Exactly. Right. And so, they're going to drill the well regardless. But my point is that company had to negotiate fairly and transparently with the landowner and, come to an agreement. And that's the way that it ought to be. We ought not have the thumb of the government saying, hey, you can do this regardless. Now, I realize that there's, eminent domain laws and all of that. What I'm saying is, in principle, that's the way that it should work. Anytime you get government involved, it unfairly advantages either one company or another, or a company over private individuals, or the government over private individuals. And I mean, it's another example of picking winners and losers that I think is just wrong.
Well, that's socialism.
Picking winners and losers is, yeah, big time.
So is the government involved in the marketplace?
Yeah, the government doesn't need to be involved in the marketplace at all.
Yeah, there are. I would challenge you, David, to name one completely, purely capitalistic, free market, laissez-faire nation that has ever existed.
Now, completely, absolutely.
Absolutely. Now, I can name a handful. I can name a handful of communist countries that are on the other side of the political spectrum.
Well, let's hit some definitions first here, Rod. By completely and absolutely, you mean like no influence from the government at all. Is that what you're driving?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Well, then that would be pretty hard.
Total laissez-faire.
Yeah, that would be pretty hard to come up with an example of that. But then there again, I would go back to, what I said earlier, in that the government's job is to create a tax environment that's as low as possible and as fair with the least amount of regulation. And then beyond that, the government doesn't need to be involved. And when we start allowing government to get involved, well, that's where we run into a problem. I mean, you disadvantage the private marketplace, and there's a whole list of bad things that happen there. But, like purely laissez-faire system, I don't know that there ever has been one.
No, it never has. And there have been damn few communist systems, too.
And those always fail.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, and, when you look at like more modern arrangements, one of the things that, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, is that county governments and to some degree the state end up giving tax benefits to individual companies, and I'm against that too. I don't know as much about all the data centers in Cheyenne as I ought to, but I would imagine that there was some wheeling and dealing going on there.
Well, yeah, there's wheeling and dealing that goes on in a competitive government contract.
Well, and I would agree, if it's a fair contract, there ought not to be.
Well, yeah, there ought not to be a lot of stuff, but there is.
Well, and I think the solution to that, Rod, is, we elect more conservative legislators that are opposed to monkeying around in the free market. I'm one of those.
Yeah.
I'm one of those people that thinks that if a business is going to succeed, it ought to do so without government, and if it's going to fail, it needs to do so without government.
Yeah, and the other side will say the same thing. We need more government involvement in our lives. We're going to elect more liberals.
Well, yeah, of course they are.
And no communist nation has ever come about through the democratic process.
Oh, I don't know about that. I think
name one. Name one.
So no, perhaps not communistic, but definitely socialism. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Most governments in the world today, David, are socialist to one degree or another.
Yeah, and socialism is merely just a pit stop on the road to communism. I mean, communism is the terminal result of everything you're doing, that involves socialism. So I mean, that's like the end result. But there's a lot of things that government does that are purely socialistic and wrong.
Well, wrong again is placing a value judgment.
Oh, absolutely.
You think Social Security is wrong?
I think in its original conception, I think that it was absolutely a Ponzi scheme. But had it worked as it was designed, it might have been okay. But again, I'm not one of those that's in favor of creating entitlements. But I definitely think that it's a form of socialism for sure.
Yeah. I'm not going to argue with you on that.
And here's the other thing that's crazy about that. All the time you hear politicians at the federal level saying we have to balance the budget. You know what the easiest way to balance the budget is? To increase the retirement age of Social Security. But when you suggest doing that, then those same politicians that claim they want to balance the budget, they know they don't want to do that because they won't get reelected.
Well, the easiest way to balance the budget, David, in a purely economic sense, is to get rid of our $47 trillion debt.
If we could do that, it'd be awesome.
The interest payment on that debt isn't crushing our budget.
Well, Rod, before we get to the end of our time here, there is one more thing that I wanted to ask you. And I'm sure...
Yeah, the answer is no. I'm not going to do it.
Oh, I think you will. All right. So what I wanted to ask you is, I have been noticing a real increase, or maybe I'm just more sensitive to it now. But I think the old rhetoric knob in our country, in Wyoming, has been turned all the way up. And I mean, there was a protest here in Sheridan. I guess it was last weekend or the weekend before. But I saw one of the signs, and I've got a picture of it, and it said, "Let's give them 1793 France." So my question to you, Rod, is how do we turn the volume knob down a little bit?
Man, I don't know, David. It's one of the most important questions in our public life today, and not just in the United States, but around the world. If we can do it here in the United States, I think it would be great. But how do we do that? Man, I just don't know. It may be something that just needs to run its course. If people use the terms Nazi and commie often enough and vitriolic enough in their public discourse, those words will lose their meaning. They will lose their impact. They'll just be words in the white noise out there. The way to do that, the way to change how we behave as Americans, there's not one thing that will do it. There are 350 million individual decisions that must be made. And if people decide not to be, I don't know, you can bleep this word out when you asshole, then yeah, we'll have a much more civil society. But those have to be individual choices. They can't be government choices. The free market isn't going to be able to do anything to change that. That's in the heart of the individual, my friend.
Well,
do you see it differently?
I don't know. I do think that I have a solution. And again, I think you hit the nail on the head that it's an individual choice to say, hey, I really can talk to this person with whom I disagree, and to just sit down and have a conversation. And I think more often than not, even if you completely disagree with somebody, you end up finding out that you have at least a couple of things in common. And it's to suggest that politics in our country has that there was ever a time where it wasn't, vitriolic and loud and sometimes really offensive, is really to misunderstand history. I mean,
exactly.
Thomas Jefferson accused John Adams of being a hermaphrodite. John Adams accused Thomas Jefferson of wanting to fill the White House with French prostitutes. So, and at the time, that was pretty outrageous, right? Funny, but outrageous. So we've never lived in a time where, everybody has really been nice to each other. But I do think that we can get to a point where we can have conversations. And I think a starting point of that is doing what we're doing right now. And, you and I, we've always got along okay. But there's a great deal that we disagree on. But we're still able to sit down and have a conversation and laugh a little bit.
Yeah. That's sort of becoming a lost art, David. Maybe our example is going to help, maybe not. I don't know.
Well, I don't know. I've got a lot of listeners that every time I announce that you're going to be on the program, they revile in fear and disgust. Oh my God, why are you having him on the program? Well, and
that's because they know what I'm wearing when I talk to you.
I don't even want to know. But I do think a good first step is to have conversations like this. It's one of the reasons why this year I've made a real effort to get some people on the show that I don't think there's more than a handful of things we agree on. That's why I had Mike Yen and Carly Provenza on the show.
I was going to bring that up. Good work, Cowboy. Good work.
Well, it was an interesting time. I'll tell you that. But anyway, Rod, I appreciate you coming on the show, my friend. I don't know that we solved any problems, but maybe we created a couple of them.
Hey, anytime, David. I enjoy these, and if you want to talk separation of church and state sometime, why, just kiss my ring and call me Cardinal, and let's do it.
Sounds good. I'll put that one on the agenda. All right, Rod. You have a good afternoon, my friend.
Thanks, David. See ya.
All right, bye. All right, well, there you have it. My interview with the infamous Rod Miller. Now, if you've got some thoughts about how that thing went, it is Open Line Friday, so go ahead and give me a call. 307-374-8989 is the number here in the studio. 307-374-8989. I don't want that last part that we talked about to get lost in this whole discussion. That we have to be able to sit down and have a conversation, even with the people that we absolutely disagree with, and resist the urge to call them Nazis or fascists or any of those terms, because there are very, 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 very few people that actually meet that definition. And if you're seeing someone on social media refer to another person as a Nazi, here's a good place to start. I did this the other day. On one of my posts, actually, it was Rod Miller. They were somebody was going after, and they said that I think they said he was not unintelligent and a Nazi. Well, Rod is neither of those two things, so I just responded, hey, tone it down. He's not a Nazi, and he's certainly not unintelligent. So, but that's what we got to do, right? Hold each other accountable and be open to having the conversation. It doesn't mean that you have to agree with anybody. You just have to be open to it. that given the opportunity, if you can make some headway with somebody that you disagree with, you'll find that you probably have a couple of things in common. Let me give you a perfect example. One day I was walking down the steps from the House chamber in the Capitol, and Mike Yen was to my left. And I said, Mike, you voted for that gun bill. What's happening there? Are you coming to our side? And he kind of laughs and he goes, well, actually, David, you're exactly wrong. I voted for that because it's spending money, and I'm a Democrat, and that's what I like to do. And then we proceeded to have a 10-minute conversation about guns. But you see, even though I disagree vehemently with just about every one of his positions, there are still things that we can agree on, and that is the case with most people. We just got to get out of our head enough to where we're open to the possibility of having a conversation. If you want to answer my question, the last one that I asked Rod, I think that's a good place to start. May not be the answer, but it is an answer. We're going to take our last break, and when we come back, we'll finish up the program. The phone number in the studio, 307-374-8989. Give me a call. We'll talk about it. If you want to complain about my interview with Rod, give me a call. Back in a minute.
This our town of Halloween. This is Halloween. This is Halloween. One would scream in the dead of night. This is Halloween. Everybody make a scene. Trick or treat till the neighbors gotta die of fright. It's our town. Everybody scream.
Yeah, I know. The weather seems to be toying with us. 60 one day, 42 the next, and pretty soon, my friends, those 6s and 4s are going to turn into 3s and 2s. Though we all want to avoid it, that white stuff is coming, my friends, and you will be shoveling the walk in it. It's cold, it's unpleasant, and nobody likes to do it. But you could make it just a little bit more comfortable and prevent your feet from turning into a giant block of ice. In fact, you could keep them nice and warm and toasty, and your toes will never even know that they're outside. The rest of you may be frozen solid, but at least your feet won't be. To make all this happen, you just need a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They are the finest socks that I've ever put on my feet. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you won't be disappointed. Are you one of those guys that listen to the president just a little bit too closely and now you're tired of winning? Are you getting the feeling that there's been way too many good things happening in our country and you just can't take it anymore? Well, if you are, and you think you should follow Rosie O'Donnell's example and get the heck out of Dodge, you need to call Rebecca Bextel at eXp Realty. She'll make those foreign country living ideas a reality for you. All you have to do is call 307-699-3519, and she'll make sure some freedom-loving, red-blooded American will now live in the home that you no longer want. If you want to sell your house, or if you want to buy one that's way better than the house you have right now, give Rebecca a call. Again, her phone number is 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Cowboy State Politics is only going to get stronger. This program only continues to expand, quite frankly, faster than I ever could have imagined. If you want to be part of the show today, the phone number is 307-374-8989. It's Open Line Friday on Cowboy State Politics Live. Also, if you haven't done so already, go to the Cowboy State Politics website, cowboystatepolitics.com, and sign up for what will be, I've made the decision, my friends, executive decision, that it'll be a weekly newsletter. And the only way that I can send you a newsletter is if I have your email address. So go to the website. First thing you'll see is a pop-up that says, give me your address, and I'll send you a newsletter. From the Blaze, Trump declares victory on climate change hoax after Bill Gates issues concession memo. And I quote, President Donald Trump said opponents of the climate change hoax had won a struggle after Bill Gates said supporters should pivot their efforts. Gates has been a long-time proponent of policies to fight climate change, so-called climate change. But on Monday, he took a far more moderate tone that accepted the survivability of slightly higher global temperatures. Bill Gates has finally admitted that he was completely wrong on the issue. So says Donald Trump. Quote, we just won the war on the climate change hoax. Bill Gates has finally admitted that he's wrong. Gates issued the announcement in a memo titled 3 Tough Truths About the Climate. He described the previous view on climate change as the following, quote, in a few decades, cataclysmic climate change will decimate civilization. The evidence is all around us. Just look at all the heat waves and storms caused by rising global temperatures. Nothing matters more than limiting the rise in temperature. He added, fortunately for all of us, this view is wrong. Gates opined that governments may have to, quote, invest in cooling centers and better early warning systems to extreme heat or weather events, but added that we will be able to live and thrive in most places on Earth for the foreseeable future. He went on to say that the world's efforts are better spent trying to reduce poverty and disease. To that, I absolutely agree. Quote, the doomsday outlook is causing much of the climate community to focus too much on near-term emissions goals, and that's diverting resources from the most effective things we should be doing to improve life in a warming world. Well, it was only a matter of time before one of the world's richest men finally admitted that he wasn't making any ground on climate change. But make no mistake, this is not because Bill Gates has changed his mind about the warming of the climate or any of that, or his thoughts on depopulation or anything like that. It's purely a political message. Now, we talked earlier about the reason why TV networks are changing their tune a little bit. That's a ratings question there. This is a political one, because Gates realizes that his message of climate change isn't gaining any more ground, that in fact it is stagnating, that really the amount of people that are concerned about the climate are there's no more of them today than there were 20 years ago. And so despite all of their efforts and all of their, all of the money that has been spent to try to convince Americans that we are living in a warming world, and that it's going to completely destroy all of us, no more people are buying into their argument. And so his time is better spent on other things, like he said. But don't think that Bill Gates is going to be as magnanimous as he lets on. Poverty and disease. There's always a political agenda with that guy. But let's just be perfectly honest, right? He is the one that's building a nuclear reactor in Kemmer. And so you can't really do that and be on the side of the climate hoax all at the same time. So with him, he hasn't changed his opinion. He's changed his politics, and that is usually the case with most of these things, my friends. Don't mistake him for being magnanimous, because he's not. From Fox News, now Jon Stewart, talk about a radical leftist. He sparked an outrage the other day by comparing Zoran Mamdani to Jackie Robinson. Now, I didn't even know how you can even draw that comparison. But here's what the Fox News piece says. Quote, social media users criticized Comedy Central's host Jon Stewart Tuesday for comparing New York City Democratic Socialist candidate Zoran Mamdani to baseball legend Jackie Robinson. During an interview with Mamdani on The Daily Show, Stewart said that the Muslim candidate was having, quote, a bit of a Jackie Robinson moment, suggesting Mamdani is trailblazing a political path as an ethnic minority was like Robinson breaking the color barrier in Major League Baseball. Here is Jon Stewart saying it as ridiculous as it actually is. Man.
I wish you all the best. Honestly, I think any New Yorker who looks at someone getting an opportunity, who's representing communities that have not been as represented, a Muslim, a young person, a progressive, a democratic socialist, there are so many different communities that are looking to you, and this, I hate to put it on you, as a bit of a Jackie Robinson moment. And I know that probably wields some weight, but man, oh man, what an exciting opportunity.
What an exciting opportunity. Listen to the crowd. Now, make no mistake, the only reason that Jon Stewart is giving him such accolades is that Mamdani is an admitted, well, he says Democratic socialist, but really what he is a communist. If you're going to believe in all the things that he said, seizing the means of production and that we have to be more honest about our socialism, really, he's a communist. That is what Jon Stewart is excited about, that there's actually going to be a communist that's in power in a major U.S. city. It doesn't have really anything to do with him being a Muslim, although Zoran Mamdani is, and he's a radical Islamist to boot. I mean, there have been a lot of things that guy has said about Israel, about Jews, about capitalists, about Christians. I mean, it is a really long list. And I'm still shocked that New York, as liberal as they are probably going to elect him. Though, I mean, Andrew Cuomo, I mean, he's showing some signs of life, but I really don't think that he's going to pull off an electoral win against Mamdani. It's just the margins are not close enough to do that. Perhaps if Andrew Cuomo was within the margin of error, he might be able to pull it off, but he's not. And certainly there is no comparison with Zoran Mamdani and Jackie Robinson. I mean, breaking the color barrier in baseball is not the same thing as a radical communist being elected. Okay, so the communist being the mayor of New York, yeah, that's probably a first. Though, I mean, hold on. It's a first for someone who is admitted to be a communist. Bill de Blasio definitely was a communist, but he never came out. I don't think that he ever came out and admitted it. So that part is a first. But it is not something as monumental as Jackie Robinson being the first African American to play in Major League Baseball. And the truth is, there were a lot of really talented African American baseball players that did not get to make it to the major leagues. And, Josh Gibson, catcher, man, that guy was incredible. But Jackie Robinson, Mamdani is not. At least Jackie Robinson was doing what he loved to do, honestly. Mamdani isn't. He's lying to his constituents. He's not a Democrat. He is a radical communist. And New Yorkers are going to find out that that's absolutely the case. This is another example of take them at their word. I don't know how many times I have to say this, my friends, that these people on the radical fringe left say some pretty crazy things, and many of them believe it. I am constantly baffled why we on the right do not take these people at their word. Had everybody read Obama's book, which, I mean, trust me, it was a pretty good thing to keep on your nightstand if you wanted to fall asleep quickly. But had we all paid attention to what he wrote, we would have known exactly who Barack Obama is. And we didn't. And so we elected him twice. And, as radical as he was, maybe behind the curtain in private conversations, he is as radical as the left wing of the Democrat Party is today. But at least outward, how he ran the office, yeah, it was pretty radical, but we're not talking communist. Not saying that he isn't. I'm just saying that what we saw was not necessarily as radical as that. Let's see. Well, enough of that guy. Let's talk about something fun. Karine Jean-Pierre, the former White House press secretary who made it her mission to tell everybody, every opportunity she had, how she was the first lesbian press secretary, as if any of that crap ever mattered. We all would have paid much more attention to her if she was, actually did her job instead of just reading from a binder. From, I believe, This is the Blaze, Karine Jean-Pierre's humiliating book tour is even worse than you think. And I quote, Karine Jean-Pierre has been hawking a new book in a desperate attempt to cash in on her time as White House press secretary. But it's not going very good. Whereas fellow lesbian propagandist Rachel Maddow of PMS-NBC suggested that her book was, quote, truly new and valuable contribution to our understanding of the Biden presidency, the Washington Post shredded the book. A look inside a broken White House outside party lines, noting that it was a fascinating book for all of the wrong reasons. Sorry, I'm not trying to be dense. I'm a little unclear about what this has to do with Democratic leaders. The reviewer, confronted with 180 pages worth of Jean-Pierre's thoughts, quote, written in the outmoded register of one whose one of those lawn signs proclaiming that, quote, in this house, we believe in kindness is everything, expressed amazement, quote, that someone who writes in such feel-good, thought-repelling cliches was hired to communicate with the nation from its highest podium. That part is truly amazing. The Post concluded on the basis of the book that Jean-Pierre is, quote, a blinkered establishmentarian whose recent departure from the Democrat Party and identification as an independent, quote, seems to be less of a strategy than a style, whose thinking remains so decidedly in the box, and who, quote, appears to have little authentic understanding of why her erstwhile party's approval rating has cratered. Now, Megyn Kelly and Stu Burguiere is the co-host of Glenn Beck's show, discussed this book and pointed out that her book tour isn't nearly as accurate, and accurate is a term I use loosely, but doesn't really bear any resemblance to what she wrote in the book. Check this out.
She won't be stopped, and I have to say, I'm here for it. I'm going to pick the dumbest comment that she's made yet. It's actually a lie. I can't find out I can't tell from the soundbite list which one it is. Can you guys roll the one, which is obviously the lie about which White House she's speaking for, which was told on Morning Joe today, because let's keep in mind that the name of her book is Independent. Give it to me again, Steve. Independent. And then Inside a Broken White House. Okay, so that's her title. A look inside a broken White House. Watch this.
Right here in the subhead is a broken White House. And if it's not questions about his health, what made it a broken White House?
So the broken White House is about this current moment.
Okay.
So I talk about the story of my personal side of the story of what happened and what I saw as White House press secretary. I think I can speak to it more in a different way, more personally even than most people.
So tell us what you saw day in and day out.
And so the broken White House is the White House that is currently in, obviously has the administration, the Trump administration, and what I'm seeing.
What?
Do you believe that? She now wants us to believe that when she refers to a broken White House, she's talking about the Trump White House, even though the subtitle of the book is An Inside Look at It. Since when is she inside the Trump White House? This is an obvious lie to try to minimize the blowback she's getting from Team Blue for her inane book in which she says she's leaving the Democrat Party because she's so mad about what they did to poor Joe Biden. So now she's trying to distance herself from her printed criticisms of the Democrat Party by saying what she's really arguing is this current White House is the broken one. How she got inside, nobody knows, Stu.
Well, that's exactly the point. Karine Jean-Pierre isn't saying anything that is actually true in her book. Rather, her book tour is going so terribly that she has to try to change the narrative and convince people to buy it and that it's something that it's not. But this is this typifies how Democrats operate, that nothing that they say is actually the truth. And when they try to tell you the truth, it's couched in such a fashion that it's actually pretty close to a lie anyway, that the only thing that you can really do is read between the lines and try to derive what they're actually saying out of it. Because we all know whatever the Democrats accuse conservatives of, that's what they're actually doing, that they are the ones that are perpetrating all of that instead of the Republicans. And so, why you would buy that book, I have no idea. But I'm not saying that reviews are accurate in any way, but when the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post is shredding the book and you happen to be one of the darlings of the Biden presidency, there's usually a pretty big problem. My guess is it's probably going to land with a thud, just like the 107 Days book by Kamala Harris, the one that she's doing the exact same thing, by the way. Trotting around the country and the globe trying to get interviews to drum up business, drum up sales for her book. But it's not going to work because we all know that it's a load of bullcrap. And that's pretty much everything that comes out of the Democrat Party. And definitely definitely the Biden presidency. Here's another one from The Blaze. Black lesbian former White House press secretary says Democrats lost because they ignored black women. She was the press secretary, and correct me if I'm wrong, but she happens to be black, and they had Kamala Harris as the vice president. So I'm not exactly sure what ignoring what was going on. She says, and I'm quoting now, she says the party is not far left enough to serve the needs of its constituents. Former White House press secretary Karine Jean-Pierre had a lively interview with Stephen Colbert, where she accused the Democrat Party of ignoring black women. What about Winsome Earl Sears? Is she a black person? Why? I mean, if this is so important, why are you not supporting her in Virginia? Jean-Pierre, who is black and identifies as gay, who really gives a crap, defended statements she made in her book against Democrats, while also defending former President Joe Biden supporting extremists seeking election. Quote, millions of people who voted in 2020 for the Biden-Harris ticket did not come out in 2024. We have to figure out why. What happened there? Colbert pressed Jean-Pierre on whether she was weakening the effort to oppose President Donald Trump by criticizing the Democrat Party and leaving to become an independent. Quote, do you recommend everyone leave the party? And if so, where did they go? Because organization is how you face tyranny. Freelancing isn't going to get anybody anything done. And here's what she says, quote, so here's the thing. I'm not telling everybody to be an independent. I'm trying to start a conversation. I'm not saying that we need a third party. I'm saying that right now the two-party system is not working. Well, that's not what she's saying in the book. And it doesn't really have anything to do with the Democrat Party ignoring black women, which I think that absolutely they did, because the Democrat Party really doesn't care about African Americans in this country at all. You know, if they did, they wouldn't be so in favor. Oh, and the government shutdown too, by the way. There are a ton of single-parent African-American families that subsist, I'm not saying wholly, but at least in part, on SNAP benefits. And it's the Democrat Party that's refusing to fund those SNAP benefits for all of those people. And so if they actually cared about African-Americans, you would see them act entirely different. But again, everything with the Democrats, everything with Karine Jean-Pierre, with the Biden administration, Chuck U. Schumer, all of them, everything is politics. None of them really care about people on the ground, actually their constituents. Rather, it's all politics, my friends. Jean-Pierre claimed that people would stop her in public and ask tearfully, what's happening? Why is the Democrat leadership not fighting? What's happening? We need more. How are we going to get out of this? Colbert pointed out that many popular politicians like AOC and Mamdani are socialists, which says to him that the party is not meeting the needs of many on the far left. Quote, they're actually throwing people under the bus who are vulnerable and need protection, Jean-Pierre said. That is probably the only honest thing that she has said in all of her conversations about her book. And it's just another one of these disingenuous bullcrap memoirs from people on the left that are just trying to cash in, while at the same time arguing against the very system that they're trying to cash in on. And here's another one. This, from the Federalist. With Mamdani endorsements, the Democrats are finally admitting that they're full of socialists, as if we didn't already know that. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries endorsed socialist candidate Zohran Mamdani for mayor of New York last week. Governor Kathy Hochul is another one. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. For years, mainstream Democrats have tried to claim that the socialists, like Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders and AOC, were merely loud voices on the outskirts of an otherwise mainstream Democrat Party. Or, like Jeffries, they hide behind claims that they disagree with the likes of Mamdani in principle, while supporting, quote, the spirit of his positions. Following Ocasio-Cortez's 2018 upset against longtime incumbent Joe Crowley, then House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi said that socialism, quote, was ascendant in that district, perhaps, but not in the Democrat Party, according to CBS News. Pelosi has also, as described in Politico, feared the squad's demands would imperil hard-won Democratic control because most Americans are center-right. I think if you take and the last election is a really good example of that. And frankly, that presidential elections tend to go, back and forth is evidence that the main the main chunk of the voters in this country are more towards the center. And I would argue that they're center right. And every time you see a Republican win, it's usually a pretty big win, no matter what Kamala Harris says. It's because we as conservatives, we get lazy. Our guy wins, and we sit back and think, okay, mission accomplished. We're done. We can go fishing. But in reality, the Democrats are the ones that stomp on the gas. They're the ones that continue campaigning, that work harder. And frankly, we get outworked. And then the very next election, we have low voter turnout, and the Democrats take it. If Republicans, if there is high turnout in an election, usually, not saying all the time, usually the Republican candidate wins. And I attribute that to this being a center-right country. Well, my friends, that pretty much burns up another busy broadcast 2 hours on the program. It's Halloween, so make sure that you're safe when you're out there driving. There's going to be little kiddos running all over the place, and definitely in Northeast Wyoming, there isn't any school today. So they're going to be out this afternoon. Make sure that you keep your eyes peeled for all the little ghouls and goblins. Don't miss the Halloween story that I'm going to publish probably around noonish, maybe a little bit after, but it's a tradition here on Cowboy State Politics, so we're going to go ahead and do that. But for now, my friends, happy Halloween, have a good weekend, and we'll see you next week. Don't forget to sign up for the newsletter. See you later, my friends. Have a good weekend.